moment from the past, escape from Axayacatl.
The priests warned our old man Moctezuma, but how did he behave? He didn't listen to them. That's why our land was cursed. The ttito have punished us,
said Axayacatl, Weyitlatoani of Tenochtitlan. Tizoc and Ahutzotzli, Axayacatl's brothers, whom he had invited to his palace today, listened attentively to him.
Remember how many people died from lack of food in the fields?
Axayacatl continued to raise his voice.
How many animals died first from drought, and then from the cold? Texcoco waters first flooded Tenochtitlan and fish swam near Cihuatlatoani, and then the water retreated very far, and the plantings in the Chinampas dried up. All he had to do was to obey the priests and bring the people of the Mexihkah as a gift to the ttito, and not just simple slaves.
From the windows of the hall, one could see the tops of the pyramids of the great city. Tizoc and Ahutzotzli, sitting on the skins spread out on the floor, did not move, and fixing their eyes on Axayacatl's face, listened attentively to him. They knew that it was better not to contradict their younger brother. Maybe he wasn't the cleverest, but the tlatoani of other cities loved him, and the priests talked about his proximity to the ttito. He did no wrong to his brothers. On the contrary, he often consulted with them, as he was now. His brothers just had to listen carefully and do what he said. For woe to him who incurred the wrath of Axayacatl. He was in a rage right now. He was about to grab his favorite translucent, blue obsidian dagger hanging from his belt and pounce, even possibly on one of his brothers.
So that's what I'm telling you. The curse of Tlatoani, the ticitl of the earth, may touch even me. The priests warned my grandfather that he should not keep this girl alive. She's cursed. She will spread her curse on all of our altepetl. She will bring new disasters to Tenochtitlan.
In that case, get rid of her,
Tizoc suggested.
Atotoztli has long been transformed into a bird flying across the sky and into the sun. No one can stop you.
I thought the girl was living with Atotoztli,
Axayacatl shouted.
but it has turned out that she hid her somewhere else. When Atotoztli went under the fifth earth, I forced her maid to answer my questions, and she told me where the girl was hidden. My jaguars have already rushed there. Believe me, I will give her to the ttito Tlatoani myself when I find her.
With these words, Axayacatl grabbed his knife. Chimalli had learned he would no longer receive funds for taking care of the girl from a maid from the Weyitlatoani's palace. This maid regularly visited their small but cozy house in the city of Tlacopan, which was part of the Triple Alliance. Atotoztli had settled Anacaona and Chimalli in this city, connected to the island of Tenochtitlan by a bridge, in order to keep the girl closer to herself but, at the same time, away from Axayacatl. Anacaona wasn't to know she had a mother. That's what Atotoztli had decided. The maid showed great courage when she ran to Chimalli and told him about Atotoztli's death. After all, mention of the death of a Cihuatlatoani was forbidden outside the palace. The secret was kept in order to prepare for the transition of power from Moctezuma and Atotoztli to the new Weyitlatoani. To do this, it was necessary to eliminate a lot of high-ranking officials, judges, and generally unnecessary witnesses who may prevent a smooth transition of power to the new supreme ruler. If they found out about the Cihuatlatoani's death, they could escape before they were detained. The next day, Chimalli and 6-year-old Anacaona went to the forest as usual. There they collected fruits for the girl and medicinal herbs for the father's needs. As the little girl helped her father collect the medicinal herbs, she sniffed them and carefully put them in special rag pockets. But Chimalli could not stop thinking about Anacaona's future, whom he loved very much. Of course, he thought, now she would be taken to the palace and after that, would disappear from his life. A girl with the blood of Weyitlatoani in her veins should never have lived the hard life of Macehualtin. However, Chimalli had been alarmed by the urgency of the maid. After telling him about Atotoztli's death, she added that Anacaona was in great trouble and immediately ran away. What kind of trouble could it be? And how could he, Chimalli, prevent it? Fortunately, returning home, Chimalli saw the jaguar warriors from afar with their ribbons on their forearms. Some of them were running around the house and asking neighbors questions. Others searched inside the house, occasionally shouting to the warriors who remained outside, and it became clear to Chimalli the kind of trouble his adopted daughter was in. The power in the country was passing into other hands, and Anacaona could interfere. Of course, these assailants could only have been sent to Chimalli's house by Axayacatl himself. Once, a long time ago when Axayacatl was the tlatoani under Moctezuma, he introduced a new rule for his army. During one of the military campaigns, Axayacatl decided that his warriors would wear ribbons that depicted the name of the warrior, the city from which he came, and the number of captives he captured. The innovation turned out to be very convenient. First of all, it made it possible to identify the dead. Secondly, the ribbons also helped the otomis, the chiefs of the detachments, give military commands to their subordinates with the help of special gestures. Over time, all the warriors of Tenochtitlan began to wear such ribbons, and then civil officials began to wear them. It even became fashionable to wear such ribbons. Depending on the position of the owner, the ribbon had a special color, usually scarlet or yellow for warriors, and white for state employees. Later, laws were also issued that punished impostors for fake ribbons or false information on them. Ribbons eventually were worn by all people in Aztlan who were related to public service. Thanks to these ribbons, Chimalli easily identified Axayacatl's jaguars. He always remembered the hatred with which Axayacatl looked at the newborn Anacaona as he cut the umbilical cord connecting daughter to mother with his obsidian knife. Therefore, as soon as he saw the jaguars in his house, Chimalli immediately grabbed Anacaona by the hand and retreated with her into the shadows. After waiting for the right moment, he led her away from the house. Anacaona stared open-mouthed into his face. In her surprise, she even dropped the orange she was eating, but her father did not let her pick it up. They walked faster and faster, and soon they were away from their home, and then from the city. Chimalli did not yet know where they would go, but he understood that he and his daughter could not stay in Tlacopan now, and it would be impossible to go to Tenochtitlan. They would be looking for them there too. Right now, the safest place for them was the crowded road they were walking on. However, Anacaona soon began to tire. The girl did not understand why they could not return home. Finally, she whimpered. Hearing his daughter crying, Chimalli stopped, squatted down, and hugged her.
"Daughter, we don't have a home now,"
he said.
Why?
"Because evil people have settled there. They are very dangerous, more dangerous than snakes and crocodiles."
The shrewd Anacaona stopped crying and sighed.
So we'll have to look for another home.
After a little rest, the father and daughter continued their journey along the road that circled the lake. 2 days later, they came to the city of Texcoco. The road had tired them out tremendously. During all this time, Chimalli ate only a couple of fruits, and he fed his daughter only once when he managed to kill a blackbird and roast it over a small fire. During the day, they were tormented by the blinding sun, and at night Chimalli carried his daughter in his arms. At the entrance to Texcoco, Chimalli saw a lot of warriors who were clearly preparing for a military campaign.
"Where is your Cihuacoatl?"
Chimalli asked them. The warriors took him and Anacaona to their commander.
"What do you want?"
He asked, looking suspiciously at Chimalli, then at his daughter.
"Do you need an experienced ticitl?"
Chimalli asked in response. Suddenly, this very formidable-looking man smiled.
"Experienced, you say? We have a lot of ticitl, but none are experienced. Axayacatl kept the most skilled ones to himself."
"I'm ready to be a ticitl during your campaign,"
Chimalli said.
"I have been treating people for many years."
"Yes, and where are you going to put her?"
The Cihuacoatl pointed at Anacaona. At the same time, he could no longer refrain and smiled.
"She'll stay with me,"
Chimalli said.
"She has already experienced mortal danger, and the war will be no more terrible for her."
Chimalli was telling the absolute truth. He understood that he and Anacaona would not be able to survive on the street or in the jungle. With this company, they would have food, lodging, and protection from the Axayacatl's jaguar warriors who would now be looking for them everywhere, and no one would think to look for a father with a 6-year-old daughter among warriors going on a campaign. This is how Chimalli and Anacaona found themselves at war for the first time, joining a military campaign to the distant lands of Iztli Koyotl. Chapter 11. Forgery. Brother Pascoal believed that the punishment of humanity for the Tower of Babel would one day end. Through his prayers and studies, he intended to bring the day closer when people all over the world could begin to understand each other again. He believed he could understand any foreigner if he put his mind to it. After all, the apostles, the messengers of Christ, had the gift of understanding all the languages in the world. Brother Pascoal himself had already learned a dozen languages, including the languages of the Maranos and Moriscos. He gained this particular knowledge by helping his father hire sailors for long sea voyages. Only a few Portuguese would agree to sail into uncharted seas. The mercenaries, heretics fleeing from Castile, or prisoners who were sold as slaves in the markets, came to the rescue. However, it was necessary to negotiate with them, teach them how to work on ships, and explain the rules of payment. The most difficult were the taciturn captains who always lied, telling tales about their past successes and trying every possible way to evade responsibility for the hired team. As a result, he cultivated and multiplied his knowledge, which he extracted himself at the monastery at which he lived. For Pascoal, any word was like a candle between two mirrors, which was repeated from reflection to reflection. Each time not noticeably changed, it recurred into infinity.
That's how languages repeat the same word,
Pascoal argued.
but each in its own way, because all people are brothers, which means they all have the same language.
In the Lisbon Jeronimos monastery, all this was not yet considered heresy, but no one considered young Pascoal's opinion there. All that was required of him was to perform feats of obedience, pray, observe the rules and the authorities, and not indulge in new fantasies that would embarrass the brethren. Therefore, the abbot had recently imposed a penance on Pascoal and sent him to the white clergy in the church of Leiria to atone for his superstition.
Those whom you love, you will punish.
The abbot said with finality and added,
Don't come back until you have learned the languages of birds and wolves.
About this possibility, Brother Pascoal had accidentally also let slip. Therefore, Pascoal's father would have to wait a little for his son's help to hire sailors, perhaps only for a season. Brother Pascoal recalled all this as he was entering the prison. Was this a trap? It all came together very well, his penance, the need for an interpreter conveniently here, away from Lisbon and his father. Maybe they would take him to where the prisoner was supposedly sitting and leave him there as well. He wouldn't be able to tell his father anything. It was cold and stuffy in the dungeon. There, on a round block, sat a man dressed in only a loincloth. Next to him was a table with a jug on it. There were no other items in the cell. Pascoal looked at the man and realized he was shivering from the cold. Judging by his face and tattoos, he was definitely not European but was lighter-skinned than most Africans.
Who are you?
Pascoal asked him in Arabic. The prisoner uttered a word, but Pascoal did not understand him.
Who are you?
He repeated his question in Hebrew. Pascoal asked his question in all the languages he knew, but the prisoner either pronounced the word he had already said or did not answer at all.
Well?
Furtado got bored.
What does he say?
He says he wants to get warm, Senior Officer.
Pascoal answered.
And he wants to eat. Also, he needs light because the darkness can make him blind.
He wants to eat? He is a bandit!
Furtado said angrily.
He and his friends killed our soldiers, and probably killed others elsewhere as well, on the high road.
Really? And I suppose rumors have already spread around the city that this is the Red Ghost?
Pascoal said ambiguously.
What?
Here's what, Senior Officer, I can't talk to him here because your torch will soon go out, and he and I have to talk with our fingers. In general, I need to be able to consider him properly in order to determine the right language. In addition, he needs to be fed and warmed. Otherwise, he'll die, and we won't learn anything from him. Oh, then you'll get it from the authorities.
You are a heretic to protect him.
Furtado shouted.
They were right about you. You should be put here yourself.
I'll be waiting for you to bring this man upstairs.
Pascoal said calmly. He really knew how to be arrogant when he wanted to.
And how dare they keep you in a monastery?
They'll also leave you without a pension.
Pascoal snapped over his shoulder.
Should I poison both of them?
Furtado thought.
Have they already been conspiring?
Upstairs, Pascoal was given a bright room with a barred window. The prisoner was put right near him. At the request of Pascoal, a large bowl of porridge with meat was brought to the prisoner from the fortress kitchen, and he was given a spoon. The prisoner smiled, turned over the spoon in his hands, put it down, and proceeded to eat with his fingers. Furtado glared at him and then at Pascoal with hatred. His plan was all going to hell with the help of a monk.
While this bastard is here,
Furtado was thinking.
He won't allow me the opportunity to poison the prisoner, that's for sure, and he won't give me a chance to do it later either. He'll go straight from here to his people in the church and talk about everything. He'll probably complain to the castellan too. Who knows, maybe this prisoner is really a big deal? He carried so much gold on himself. Naked, but he wore it blatantly.
Bring here what he had with him,
said Pascoal as if he read his thoughts.
He says that he had jewelry.
Pascoal had presumed they were there by the pale marks on the arms, shoulders, and chest of the half-naked prisoner.
No, he literally sees through me like through water, this monk. My bad luck again.
Furtado thought and turned away. Soon the prisoner was brought his cape made of light fabric and his gold jewelry. Meanwhile, Pascoal and the prisoner got acquainted. They did it the way that multilingual people all over the world usually do.
Pascoal.
The monk tapped himself on the chest. Then he pointed his finger at the prisoner's chest. The man smiled and also hit his chest.
Chimalli.
Pascoal called the head of the garrison and demanded paper and quill.
What is this for?
Furtado asked suspiciously.
I am going to study his language.
Why? What is there to study? He's only one, and even then, not for long.
Furtado said stubbornly.
To bring him to our faith.
Pascoal looked Furtado right in the eyes. Furtado bit his tongue. Promptly, paper and quill were brought to the room. It turned out that the prisoner drew very well, in a manner that was strange to Pascoal. He produced angular figures of people, animals, trees, and boats. They were strange, drawn all about the same size. This is how the prisoner proceeded to describe his homeland. Having depicted a seashore with palm trees on the edge, he said,
Aztlan.
Pascoal took the paper from him, drew on the other side of the sheet something like a reflection of this shore, and said,
Portugal.
Chimalli nodded his head briskly. With the help of such drawings, Pascoal continued to learn the new language. Soon he found out that this language was called Mexihkah, that Chimalli has a cihuacoatl daughter, and he himself is a master of Iztli Koyotl, which Pascoal understood to mean remove pain. By the end of the day, they began to understand each other better. Pascoal wrote down Okikli, man, cihuatl, woman, pillai, child, atl, water, tlan, land, tlatoani, food, and coatl, tree. Pascoal, with the help of Chimalli, drew sheet after sheet of pictures, repeated new words, and obediently made corrections to their pronunciation. Pascoal also helped by creating gestures and facial expressions. They were so thorough that by the evening of the next day, Pascoal pronounced easy and brief phrases in the new language almost fluently. The attendant standing outside the door was puzzled to hear their laughter. the laughter of two unfortunate people, a prisoner, whom anyone could kill like a dog here, and a youngster, forever deprived of carnal joys. Pascoal now knew for sure that Chimalli had come to Portugal from a country that he, Pascoal, was not familiar with. Despite the darkness of his skin and hair, Chimalli did not know about Africa or the countries of the Middle East. He didn't know about Europe or Asia either, and when Pascoal shared his knowledge of India with Chimalli, it was firmly established that the prisoner did not come from there either. The fabric from which Chimalli's light clothes were made was also not familiar to anyone in the fortress. Chimalli also could not possibly be a runaway slave, as was suggested at the very beginning. First of all, he didn't have the hands of a laborer at all. Secondly, Chimalli had a lot of gold jewelry that he knew how to wear with dignity. Finally, he was very adept at drawing and knew how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Pascoal easily mastered the different way of writing down numbers which were represented by dots and horizontal lines. Pascoal remembered that he himself wrote down numbers in a similar way early in his childhood before he could read and write. Chimalli's knowledge was nothing like anything else discovered by any person, even in countries the Portuguese considered savage. He was a man from a completely different world, and this world was developed no less than the world of Europe. But where did he come from? Was it not from heaven itself? The long conversation between Pascoal and Chimalli ended with Pascoal going to Furtado and addressing him.
Senior officer, you are very lucky. You were entrusted with the life of a very important person, and you saved it. This man is a messenger from another world, and this meeting will change our world. Your name will go down in history. Continue to take care of our guest, and I will go to Lisbon immediately. A person will be brought here to present him to the court of scientists, priests, and the highest dignitaries of the state. Perhaps His Majesty the King himself will meet with him.
With these words, Pascoal hugged Furtado and just in case used his favorite weapon, ambiguity.
Yes, and you, too, may also have your hand shaken by the head of the royal prison in Lisbon himself.
For the first time in 30 years, Furtado felt heat rise in his cheeks and he flushed. Daniel's squad stormed into the fortress with the thunder of hooves of exhausted horses. The garrison commander, Lieutenant Furtado, was the first to run up to Daniel.
Senor Captain, trouble! The bastard who attacked our soldiers is being taken to Lisbon. And not only that, but they are also making a curiosity out of it, more so than a giraffe. And all of us, they say, are nothing compared to him.
Daniel barely looked at Furtado and did not deign to answer him. He had no time for this boring fool, almost an idiot. The family of Leandro, a man whom he could consider, if not his friend, then at least Estela's future father-in-law, had died, and Leandro was dead because he, Daniel, could not control the actions of his subordinates and those mercenaries who, it turns out, were waiting for them at the Cinta estate. How many times did Don Daniel, in front of the mirror, learn a special stately step, wave his hat, make bows, and politely nod his head? How much had he endured the shouts of his daughter, who was eternally indignant at her father's inability to learn stately manners? And now all this has come to an end. And what a scary one! The daughter's fiancé must have died, although neither Daniel nor the soldiers saw his death with their own eyes. But what they all did see was enough to affirm that Leandro's family was dead, together with his wife, son, and guest, Duke de Braganza. The laborers who had come running from all over the estate with their pitiful buckets could not even extinguish the embers still smoldering at the sight of the fire. Daniel stumbled into the hallway of his house where his wife was preparing a bath for him and collapsed on the couch. Immediately, Estela's cat silently approached Daniel. After sniffing Daniel, she began to purr and rub against his body. The door of his daughter's room creaked, and Estela came out into the hallway.
"Father, you're not yourself today,"
she said.
"I feel something has happened." "What? Respond."
Daniel got up from the couch, straightened up, and suddenly fell on his knees in front of his daughter.
Estela. Estela, I'm sorry.
What is it?
Estela shouted.
What has happened?
Don Leandro's house burned down.
Daniel cried. He raised his hands and hid his face in his palms.
Don Leandro is dead, and his family also died in the fire. I'm sorry, Estela.
Estela was silent. A thick blue vein was bulging on her neck, and a huge crease appeared on her forehead.
My soldiers came to his house to capture a dangerous criminal.
Daniel continued to mumble, holding his face and swaying from side to side.
But Leandro's servants and mercenaries attacked my soldiers. We had to fight back. The house caught fire, and the second floor collapsed onto the first, and Leandro and his family were there. I did my best not to let all those people interfere with your happiness, Estela. But now it's over. Nuno is no more.
Estela screamed and sank to the floor. Carmina came running to her daughter's cry.
What did you do to her? Stop it!
She shouted. Estela screamed again and began to beat against the hard floor and tear at her hair.
It's my fault. I told him about the ribbon.
Flashed through her mind.
Why did I do it? Why? I just wanted to be with Nuno. I just wanted to live there. To live on their estate.
Daughter.
Daughter!
Carmina and Daniel shouted. Estela let out another deafening scream and rolled towards the wall. When she reached the precious Chinese vase, however, she stopped and fell silent. Daniel was already running towards her with a cup of water.
Have a drink, Estela.
He put his hand to the back of his daughter's head and raised the cup to her lips, but Estela suddenly pushed his hand away, abruptly stood up, and began to straighten her dress.
They died, you say, in a fire.
She repeated Daniel's words.
But there are a lot of other people left on the estate. Francisco, the steward, is alive, I hope?
What are you talking about, Estela?
Carmina said with worry. Daniel briefly repeated to his wife what he had just told his daughter.
What a horror!
Carmina moaned.
And Francisco? Well, maybe he's all right.
Daniel turned to his daughter again.
And the others are also well? The servants, hands, grooms.
Estela continued.
I believe so. So what?
Daniel asked. He no longer understood how he should behave or understand his daughter's unexpectedly businesslike statements.
So, they'll all confirm my engagement to Nuno.
Estela snapped.
What engagement?
Which one?
Daniel and Carmina spoke up, interrupting each other. Had their daughter gone mad?
Which one what? I was always visiting there. I even had my own room there. According to the customs of our Christian people, if a young man and a girl spend the night under the same roof, they are obliged to get married. Don't make a face, Mama. Father, stop gawking at me. I'm not your superintendent.
Estela.
Daniel whispered.
Yes! The estate will be mine.
Estela confirmed her parents' conjecture.
But Estela!
Carmina exclaimed.
There was no engagement.
Oh, Mama! This stupid custom does not require mandatory witnesses. So, it was because I say so, and you and my father were witnesses. Father, you must take me to the king to finish this matter fast. We will tell him everything, and he will recognize me as Nuno's wife. Then the estate will be mine.
Estela, that would be a forgery!
Daniel exclaimed.
And what can you offer me in exchange, Father?
Estela shouted. Her eyes began to fill with tears, and her voice trembled.
Marry a lieutenant? And go with him to feed lice in some malarial fortress? Closer to the Moors? Or to the Castilians who continue to sharpen knives against us? And will you give me a dowry? All 3 of my dresses and a box of seashells? Your own mare, Father, who is a year older than me. Your salary for a month in advance? What else? What can you offer me?
Estela's beautiful face was transformed by anger. Her eyes were dark and bloodshot. The wrinkle that barely crossed her forehead had turned into a deep cleft, and her mouth was now disfigured by a predatory grin. It seemed that all of Estela's teeth had become fangs. Carmina and Daniel had never seen their daughter so fierce and ugly.
What? What?
Estela continued to shout, clenching her fists. Carmina, who was moving her lips soundlessly, clasped her fingers and held her hands in front of her chest. They were shaking. Daniel suddenly realized with horror that Estela was capable of killing a person, and if she were to lunge at him in her madness with a dagger, he would not be able to defend himself, because even under pain of death, he would not raise his hand against his daughter.
Estela,
he muttered.
Yes, if you want to know, I slept in the same bed as him. I am no longer a virgin, dear parents.
Daniel managed to catch his wife in time as she fainted because he was already close to her. Carmina immediately came to her senses and, looking at Daniel with horror, began to push him away.
Nuno asked me to marry him.
Estela continued to lie.
And I agreed. We were going to announce it any day now, but then this brown stray tart appeared at Nuno's house.
Estela paused and took a deep breath. Carmina looked at Daniel with the eyes of a newborn. Finally, her lips moved.
Daniel, do as she says.
And quickly!
Estela shouted.
Otherwise, the Leandro family will have other heirs. You can be sure of that.
Daniel remembered that, at the time of the attack, there was some dark-skinned girl near Nuno. He was also holding her hand when he dragged her upstairs. Damn it! He betrayed Estela, and therefore, there was nothing to lament here. They must pay for this dishonor.
I agree.
Daniel finally said, bowed his head. The next day, Daniel and Estela, accompanied by 2 servants and a maid, went to Lisbon, everyone riding. Daniel didn't need to invent an excuse to leave the fortress. Daniel would have to tell the king in person about the death of such a large figure as Duke de Braganza and the circumstances surrounding his death.
Don't forget, Father, that Leandro's family has always been on the side of the king, just like ours.
Estela instructed her father.
Tell the king that you came to Leandro only to capture de Braganza. If, God forbid, the king finds out that Leandro sided with the duke, he will be angry and take his estate for himself. Say that the fight started suddenly, and Leandro did not recognize you, because he thought that his house was being attacked by the very robbers you were catching.
Daniel looked gloomily in front of him and obediently nodded. He had already decided to agree with everything Estela said. When the tower of St. George's Castle appeared on the horizon, Estela crossed herself and then turned back to her thoughts. She knew that having acquired ownership of the estate of the late Don Leandro, she would easily find a worthy husband, perhaps even a knight. As for Nuno, well, what could you do if the Lord God himself punished his family? There was always a reason, but now her life was just beginning. A good, interesting, secure life. Daniel, who was now stealing glances at his daughter, noticed her smile and shuddered.